Right, Mr. Bashali, let's go back to that interview, please, the police interview, CPS 000019, at page 3. In that entry, which we find for 5th down, so it would have been better for me to not brace his neck. It's a question you're asking the officer. Let the what was in his mouth get stuck in his throat and the kid dies. I saved his life twice that day. I cut him down. We removed ligatures from his neck and we retrieved the phone battery that was stuck in his mouth. He was trying to get it stuck in his throat. Everyone's forgotten about that. And can we just flip over to page 8? And we'll see your answer, the second answer in. These guys are at level 10. You can't go in, please, sir, stop doing that because it ain't going to get you nowhere. You need to go in at level 11, and then me personally, and the way we're taught, you de-escalate, you bring it straight down as soon as you can, which I did, and there might be some discrepancies with what I'm about to say next, but he had no injuries. I didn't hurt him. I'm getting in compliance. I was in full control, and I saved his life twice that day, and he thanked me for it and apologised to me, which was supposed to be on camera. And I'd like to try and get that, please, so that we understand what you're saying. How did you save his life twice that day, Mr. Bashali? When did you save his life the first time?
Well, I stopped him from swallowing what was in his mouth.
Yeah. Well, that's the second time. What was the first?
And I cut the ligature from his neck.
I see. I'm slightly puzzled by what you tell us about there being a ligature, because there were 3 stages to this. The first stage, and if you want I can show you the use of force form that Mr. Loughton completed. The first stage was Mr. Loughton had been alerted by Clayton Fraser, who was on constant observations, to the fact that D1527 was in the toilet area. And when he went in, he found that he had a T-shirt around his neck, and he removed it with a fish knife. That was incident 1. Incident 2 was after that had calmed down. He has a phone battery, and he sticks that in his mouth. And when that is over, incident 3, and that's the only incident that you became involved in on that occasion, was when Callum Tully, who had been asked by Nathan Ring to watch him for a few moments, finds him self-strangulating with his hands, not with a ligature. And unless we've all missed it, there is no ligature in the third incident in which you became involved. So I'm struggling to understand what you told us a little earlier.
There was a ligature.
There was a ligature?
There was a ligature.
And what happened to it?
I don't know, I can't remember.
What kind of ligature was it?
I believe it was maybe an item of clothing or something like that, but I'm not sure.
And so that we understand what you're saying, before we see what you did leaning over him, are you saying you cut it from his neck?
I can't remember exactly when I cut it from his neck, but if you look at Charlie Francis' statement, I don't know if it's to the police or the Home Office, he mentions that I took the fish knife from his belt as well to cut the ligature.
Right, so that's Charlie Francis. Forget him for the moment. Let's just examine what you're telling us.
I'm just trying to back up what I'm saying.
No, I get that, and we will look at that. But what I'm asking you is, you have a clear recollection of removing a ligature from his neck?
Around his neck.
And how did you remove it?
With Charlie Francis's fish knife.
Charlie Francis' fish knife. And what became of the ligature?
I would have just thrown it to the side, I can't remember.
Because as I've understood the evidence, and maybe it's me, Mr. Pashali, Callum Tully found him in the toilet area, self-strangulating with his hands, and he and Clayton Fraser pulled him out from the toilet area and were trying to stop him self-strangulating, and that's when you became involved.
When I entered the room, they were up against the wall.
Who's they?
Callum, the detainee, and maybe Clayton Fraser. I can't recall, but they were up against the wall.
Yeah.
And with my assistance, we took the detainee to the ground.
Yeah. But where's the ligature?
It was around his neck.
Not tied to anything?
No.
No.
He was pulling on it.
He was just pulling on it?
I think so.
Right. And so that we're clear, the fish knife that you say, as I understand it, you used to remove it from his neck?
It wasn't my fish knife.
No, that's what I'm asking. Where did the fish knife come from?
It was on the back of Charlie Francis's belt. So
Right.
we have utility belts with our keys and other bits. I'm here, he's there. It was much easier for me to reach because it was right there to take it out of his belt.
So you say that's...
But I can't recall if the incident that you've got is that particular incident, but I know that I did that day.
Hold on. This is important because you told us earlier, Mr. Pashali, that you removed a ligature from his neck during the incident I'm asking you about, yeah? Are you saying now that it may not have been that incident after all?
There were many incidents that were almost identical that day.
We're only focusing on that day, right?
In a period of, I don't know, an hour or two, I can't recall. It was a long time ago. But we didn't just go in there once.
But there were 3 incidents, and you were only involved in the last one. You weren't involved in the first because that was Clayton Fraser and Steve Loughton when Steve Loughton removed with Clayton Fraser's fish knife the ligature from 1527's neck. You weren't involved in that.
Okay.
The second incident was after that incident when he put a phone battery in his mouth. You weren't involved in that. The only incident you were involved in was the third one. And what I'm asking you is only about the third one in which you were involved. And what I'm trying to establish through you, because you were there, is whether you are now telling us
I removed
that you may be wrong about the ligature after all.
I definitely removed a ligature from his neck.
During the occasion I'm asking you about?
I believe so.
You believe so?
It was 5 years ago. I can't.
I know, but you know...
I
Mr.
definitely removed the
Pashali,
ligature from his neck. Definitely, 100%.
Yeah, but maybe you did. But what I'm asking you about is
It
whether
wasn't on a
it was on
different day,
this
was it?
occasion. 7 o'clock, thereabouts, in the evening of the 25th of April.
Yes.
Right. So that would be the second occasion that you saved his life. And just remind us, what was the first? What was the first occasion
Well,
that
there's only
day?
2 situations. It was the ligature and the article that was in his mouth.
Yeah, but what did you have to do with the article in his mouth?
I
Are you
braced his
saying
neck.
it was the one, you're saying you saved his life twice? The ligature and because you braced his neck and
braced his
stopped
neck.
him swallowing the battery?
Correct.
Right, okay. So that's what you meant when you told the police that you saved his life twice? Now, I'd like to think about that battery a little more, and I will play some footage, but in order to save a little time, Mr. Pashali, I'm not going to play all of it now, but if at any time you would prefer me to play all of it, although it will take a good half an hour, I will do that. But let's go, please, for you, Chair, tab 35, and if we can put up on screen a transcript, please, TRN 0000001. Now, this is a transcript, Mr. Pashali, of the first part of the incident. And you see, if we go through it, Callum Tully is shouting, "Get staff in here. We need someone. Get someone from the office." Nihar. And Nihar was somebody else, I'm sure you'll remember, who was also on E-Wing at that time. Steve Loughton, fish knife, here, give us. And towards the bottom, we see Loughton saying, "Got it. And top right, "I've got it off his head. It's all right. I've got it off his head." And Loughton says, "Sit him up." So that's the first incident I've been describing to you, where he had put a ligature around his neck, and Steve Loughton, using, as I understand it, Clayton Fraser's fish knife, removes it. Charlie Francis, who is there, says, "Go up on the bed," and that's what he does. He eventually sits on the bed. And if we go to the next page, please. At the top of the page, we see Charlie Francis asking, "What's in your mouth? What's in your mouth?" Steve Loughton says, "Get healthcare down to E-Wing, room 7. Towards the bottom, Loughton says, "How did he get in there? We didn't see him." And in the right-hand column on the second page, he says, "I've been now, I've been, I will die here." And if you remember the footage, he says that several times. And then on the next page, in the right-hand column, page 3, at the top, "You leave me here, I will die." And a little further down, Steve Loughton's explaining he just tied something round his neck, and then says he's got a battery. "Give me the battery." "Don't put it in your mouth." He's got a battery in his mouth. Joe Buss, scroll down please. Joe Buss, who's present. At the bottom says it's all right. Staffer 2, whoever that is, says, "Yeah, but it's a phone battery." And it continues in that way. Next page 4, on the right-hand column, Steve Loughton at line 66. He tried to swallow a battery. He tried to swallow a phone battery. And at the bottom of the page, Steve Loughton explains it must have come out of the TV. Page 5, line 12. "Take that out of your mouth and talk to the nurse." "Tully, don't swallow it." "Take the battery out of your mouth," at line 30 and 31. And then we have other interventions. If we go to page 6, Nathan Ring is on the scene, and in the right-hand column on page 6, at the top, Loughton, he's got a battery in his mouth, the cock. "Has he?" "He swallowed it," says Staffer 2. "Going all night, isn't he?" "Yeah," says Joe Buss. "Going all night, Duracell bunny." Nathan Ring, "Swallowing batteries, you're full of it." "Burn his tongue." And then if we go all the way from there, and I'm just double checking that I haven't missed an entry. If we go all the way from there to page 10, we see an entry by you at line 19, "Who's on the constant?" Clayton still is. "I was just on that constant, but then I saw them two guys. I heard some shit, sorry." And you have an exchange with Tully. "I thought he was going to do something silly," at the top right. So I think he tied something around his neck. He was trying to strangle himself. And then you have this exchange. You thought he was telling you that it had been behind the toilet, that he had done something behind the toilet, and this exchange wasn't in the room. It was outside in the area, the landing. We go to page 11. You say at the top, "What? Actually behind the toilet? How the fuck do you? Is it broken or something?" And then Tully explains, "No, not behind the toilet, actually behind the wall." And so the exchanges carry on that way. And then it's this I want to ask you about. It's on page 11. So that's the background, which I have skated through rather rapidly. the three of you at line 60, you, Nathan Ring and Clayton Fraser, are having a discussion. And Ring says he ain't got a battery in his mouth, had he? He put the battery round his mouth and pretended to chew it up. And when I checked it, it was all in the drain. He picked it up, put it round his face, and chucked it all down the drain to look like he'd something in the toilet. And then on the next page, page 12, Callum Tully asks at line 14, how old is this guy? You say it's kind of like he's fucking 3. You say something about the battery, the rest is inaudible. Fucking newsflash, he won't stop. So pausing there for the moment, Mr. Pashali, from what Nathan Ring had said to you at that point in time, as far as you were concerned, he'd been pretending to put a battery in his mouth, and this battery all along was found down a drain.
I never said that he was pretending.
What? I'm not asking what you were saying. I'm just telling you about the conversation that you were present for, where Nathan Ring is saying he was pretending all along, and he was rubbing this battery around his face, but he never put it in his mouth or swallowed it at all. That's what I'm asking you. That was the information you had. You see what I'm saying?
I think so. You're saying that Nathan's telling me that there wasn't a battery in his mouth.
Yeah.
There was a battery in his mouth.
Yeah. But you see what Nathan is saying? There was none, and it was found down a drain. There was a little other conversation about a battery in the next transcript, but you weren't present at this time. And if we go to another transcript, TRN 0000002, Chair, divider 36 for you at page 5. Because the activity continues when on page 5, and this is Nathan Ring having a discussion with Callum Tully, and Joe Buss appears to be present at line 75, says Nathan Ring, if he's sucking a battery, he's sucking a battery, so he wants to use it as a dummy, fine, I'm okay with that. And at that point, Nathan Ring says, do you want to watch him for a bit, Callum? And that's the time before the third part of this series of incidents begins, and he does. And you'll see on page 6, if we turn to that in the left-hand column, halfway down at line 23, Tully, what are you doing? Stop it, stop. Mate, don't do that, don't do that. Give us a hand, guys, give us a hand. Stop, get your hands off. Nothing about a ligature. Get your hands off. Don't do it, mate, don't do it, mate. What's he doing? What's he doing is your first intervention at this point in line 68 and 69. Lockdown, something to lock down at line 85. The wing needs to be locked down. Top of page 7, there's 2 in the office. There should be 2 in the office. And something you say is missed at line 9. Tully says, no, he didn't. You say, sorry. Tully, I don't think he had anything in with him. I couldn't really see. I was just pulled in. I don't know. I don't know if he had. I couldn't see. Nathan just asked me to come in and have a look. And this is when, right at the bottom, line 44, you say, relax. Nothing there about any ligature being removed. And if the inaudible part of what you asked at line 9 on page 7 is whether he had anything round his neck, if that's what you asked, Tully is telling you, I don't think he had anything in with him.
Could you just go back to where you said, Tully says, don't do it, mate, don't do it, mate?
Yeah, that's
please.
Having his hands around his neck.
Well, it doesn't say that there.
No, it doesn't, but that's what Callum Tully's told us.
Well, that's not what happened.
No, and there's no reason why, if there was a ligature, Callum Tully would not tell us that there was a ligature. So this isn't a question, Mr. Pashali, of you trying to make yourself the hero of the story, is it?
How am I the hero?
By saying you saved his life twice, by making yourself look better than you actually were.
We saved people's lives every day of the week.
Yeah.
It was normal practice. Yeah. I'm not trying to make myself look like the hero. I'm telling you what happened. One
person's life you weren't attempting to save was D1527.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The one person whose life you were not attempting to save once or twice that day was D1527, was it?
Is that your opinion? You can't. How can you just say that as it's a matter of fact?
Because I'm suggesting it to you, Mr.
Thank you.
Bishop.
Then you should say that you're suggesting it, not make it sound like it's a fact, because that's not the case.
What's your answer?
My answer is that I cut a ligature off of his neck.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, you never believed for a second that he had a battery in his mouth, did you?
See, again, you're making it sound as if it's the truth. It's not the truth of the matter. I believed he had a battery in his mouth.
Well, you have to say that, don't you? Because otherwise you've got no justification for what you did.
Not at all. I've got absolutely nothing to lose. I do not work in that industry anymore. This was 5 years ago. I believed wholeheartedly he had a battery or an article in his mouth that he was attempting to self-harm or commit suicide with, as he'd done many times.
Why, if that belief is as you say it was, did you at no time alert anybody to the possibility that he had something in his mouth?
We just dealt with the incident.
Why aren't you saying to everybody around you, he's got a battery in his mouth?
Because everyone was aware of the techniques that he was using to harm himself with. There was no need for me to explain it. Everyone just automatically did what they did as they'd done before.
So by some form of...
I don't need to give a running commentary on...
Don't you?
No.
Don't you need to tell everybody around you the emergency that you're dealing with?
We all knew what we were dealing with.
How?
Because we'd done it many times before.
Well, if Nathan Ring and Callum Tully believed that the battery was a pretence and he'd never stuck a battery in his mouth, how were they to understand now that he actually had a battery in his mouth? Okay,
so you're saying that it was a pretence. If you look at the...
I'm not saying anything. I'm just
putting...
No, listen to me. I'm just telling you what the evidence suggests.
Okay. If you look at the detainee's own statement, I don't know if it's to the police or to the Home Office, I can't remember, he admits to putting batteries in his mouth that day.
I know what he says.
So...
I'm only dealing with the information that was available to you. And the information I suggest available to you was that he'd only pretended to have a battery.
I didn't believe he was pretending.
No. What made you think he had the battery in his mouth on this occasion?
I don't know, I can't remember. I believed that he had an article in his mouth.
Mm. Right, I want to please watch the video, but we're going to take it in stages, and the only one I'm going to ask to be put up is Ken Cov 1007. It's V2017-0425 00021. All right? And I want to start, if you can cue it up to the time on screen at 0750, please, 0750. And hopefully this will work. That's fine.
Stop! The ring needs to be locked down. Look at the window.
Pause there, please. Pause there. Now that we understand it, and I suppose I ought to say anybody watching, they may find some of this footage distressing, Chair, so perhaps that's a valuable cautionary note for some.
Thank you.
Well, this is the time that you're involved. You've got your legs either side of his head. We can see that he is lying on his back, and we can see your left hand. And that's you bracing his neck, is it?
Yes.
And he's making a noise, isn't he? He's screaming. He's not making any sounds that might suggest he's got something in his mouth or something in his throat? Is he?
I don't agree.
You don't agree? You think that is the noise of somebody who could have something?
He could have something in his mouth and
In his
still make
mouth.
noises.
Right. So it never occurred to you, how is he making this noise with a battery in his mouth?
You can still make noises and have a battery in your mouth.
And then we see that at this point, you're relaxing your hand under his chin when he starts to calm down. But if we look in a minute or two at 0806, we'll see you place your left hand on your thigh. Do you remember what you said during the course of the police interview with your solicitor's assistants about, and I think you said the same in fact to the PSU, that the point you were making, how am I throttling him if I place my left hand on my thigh? And we're going to see that in a few seconds. Let's just see what happens.
No, he didn't. Sorry?
Right, pause there. Stop. Zainab, thank you. We see his face. He's staring up at the ceiling. Your left hand is, as you told the PSU and as you told the police, clearly on your left thigh. And as I say, I remind you, the point you were making is if your intention had been to throttle this man, why would you do that? But what everybody might want to understand, Mr. Bashali, is what was it about his calming down that led you to put your hand on your thigh when all the time I thought you were bracing his neck in order to stop him swallowing a battery?
I was.
So why did you do that? Why did you release your grip?
Well, obviously he's calmed down, number one. I'm not certain that this footage is in its entirety. This was supplied to you by the BBC, was it?
Well, yes.
Yeah. Because I'm certain that before this point, I checked with everybody in the room to make sure that they were okay.
How did you do that?
Verbally, I said to Callum, "Are you okay?" I said to Charlie Francis, "Are you okay?" And I asked the detainee if he was okay. And I said, "Everybody is okay." I believe I said that in relation to Callum's reaction, but that is not shown.
So, what you're suggesting, Mr. Pashali, if your recollection is accurate, is
I'm
that...
pretty sure that I checked with everyone to see if they were okay.
Well, if that's right, the BBC has doctored this video, this footage. Is that what you're suggesting?
I believe it's edited in some way.
Edited?
Or, yeah, doctored, whatever you want to call it.
If it's not been edited, then what you've just told us is wrong.
I'm certain that I said those words.
Yeah. I'm more interested in why you put your hand on your left thigh if all you were doing was to brace his neck to stop him from swallowing the battery and gain compliance and gain control. When suddenly he calms down, but he's still got the battery in his mouth, according to you, so why are you taking your hand off his neck?
I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but for whatever reason, I would have felt that it was safe for me to remove my hand.
Yeah. In your police interview, and I'm not going to come out of the video now, but for the record, it was CPS 000019 at page 16. One of the things you say is, when you were asked whether you applied pressure to his neck, no, you said, I definitely made very sure. My intention was to brace his neck. I mean, also, if you watch it in its entirety, the whole thing, you know, he's hollering and screaming quite a lot. If I'm choking him, air wouldn't have been able to pass through, and any sound coming out at all. Wish we could see at what point the battery came out of his mouth, because I don't recall at what point that was. When did the battery come out of his mouth, Mr. Bashali?
I can't remember, and I agree with what you've just read out completely. I agree with what you've just read out completely.
Well,
I can't remember.
Your words.
Yeah.
We never see a battery come out of his mouth, do we? You never saw a battery.
Not on this footage, no.
And you're saying then you saw a battery come out of his mouth?
I don't know at what point the battery came out of his mouth.
You're saying you saw a battery?
I believe so. I believe he had something in his mouth.
In 8 seconds on the footage, we'll see Tully and you telling him to relax. And then at 23 seconds past, we'll see him screaming loudly when you return your hands to his throat. And it's then that you utter the words, and you can see what the subtitling is, and you'll tell us, Mr. Pashali, whether you agree that what you said is, you fucking piece of shit,
Yeah.
because I'm going to put you to fucking sleep. So we will play that, please.
I couldn't really see, I was talking in. I don't know, yeah. I could see, I literally just went to look at him then and he was doing it. Nathan just asked me to come in and look. Relax, relax.
Relax. Relax.
Fucking piece of shit. I'm gonna put you to fucking sleep.
Right, stop there, please. No doubt about the words, is there, Mr. Pashali?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And there really hasn't ever been any doubt about the words you used, has there, Mr.
No,
Pashali?
that's not true.
That's not true.
No. I've explained that in quite length this morning.
You certainly explained it. Why have you returned your hands to his throat?
Because I must have thought that he was in danger. Maybe I see something that I saw at that point. I saw something in his mouth. I can't recall. You're attempting to show that basically I'm the only person that felt there was something in his mouth. In this incident, at 8:44, Charlie Francis states, has he swallowed the battery? So obviously it wasn't only me that thought there was a battery in his mouth, or something in his mouth.
I'm not trying to show anything, I'm just asking.
Okay, well, I'm
you.
just telling you that also at 8:44, Charlie Francis says, has he swallowed the battery?
I know what Charlie Francis said.
Okay, well, I'm just trying
What
to
I'm
show that.
asking is about you, what you said, and your actions, and
I said what I said to gain compliance.
and why, having tried to get him relaxed, and his reaction is the one that we see and hear, for him to start screaming, is the cue or the trigger for you to put your hands around his neck again. That was the trigger. It had nothing to do with a battery or any belief that you had a battery in his mouth. The trigger was because he was screaming, wasn't it? That's why
No,
you do what you do. It's got nothing to do with the battery and everything to do with his reaction.
No.
As you say, in fact, at 8:37, we'll see it was Charlie Francis who said, did he swallow the battery? Because I want to ask you about this exchange, and we'll come back to it. So if we can play, and I'll ask Zeneb to stop at about 0900.
Jan, Jan, easy.
Is this one of the battery? No. It's there. In his mouth. Where? It's there.
It's over there.
Right. Got a battery. Right. Right, you're going to stop being a tool now, yeah? You're going to...
Let's stop there, thank you. Can we just run back, please, to 8:37? Now, first of all, you just had the perfect shot, but you could see that your hands were around his neck. That's it. At that point, 8:35, and if we can just run it on. Pause there. Pause there. At this point, we have a slightly clearer view. Callum Tully is saying, Jan, easy, yeah? Was there anything you think you were doing that required anybody to caution you about what you were doing?
No, not at all.
No? And then at 8:38, 8:37, so around the time we have on screen, we'll hear Charlie Francis say, "Did he swallow the battery?" Carry on, please.
Yeah, easy.
Was he swallow the battery? No, it's there. In his mouth. Where? It's there.
It's over there.
Pause there. Someone else says, no, it's here, and that could be Clayton Fraser. And you'll remember we just saw you saying, well, attributed to you, and the way the subtitling is on the screen is, in his mouth, where? Do you think there were two people speaking? You said the where, and somebody else said in his mouth? Do you want to listen to it again?
Sorry, I don't follow.
Well, let's just go back and see if we can freeze frame it where that subtitle is. It's around, I think, 8:47, where attributed to you is in his mouth where. So it comes a little after that.
No.
Right, a little after that.
No, it's there. In his mouth. Where?
Well, there. Do you hear a different tone between the words in his mouth and where?
Yeah, I say so.
Yeah. And the in his mouth comes from somebody else, and the where comes from you. Do you want to listen to it again?
I'm not 100% certain. Yeah, play it again. I can't tell.
And if it was somebody else saying in his mouth, it rather suggests that it wasn't you who said it was in his mouth, and therefore somebody else was confused whether or not a battery was in his mouth at all, but if it was somebody else, it wasn't you. I
don't follow.
The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Bashali, is all along you knew that there wasn't a battery in his mouth. You didn't believe it.
No.
You didn't think for a second there was a battery in his mouth, and what you're doing is taking advantage of all of this confusion about
No.
it.
Absolutely not.
It was found, in fact, somewhere else in the room at the time. Let's just scroll on and see what happens, because at this point, at 8:47, Mr. Bashali, whatever your belief at that stage, or up to that stage had been, you know, or knew, that the battery was somewhere else. And let's just see what happens.
It's there.
It's over there.
Right. Got battery. Right.
Oh, stop that, please. Why are your hands still around his neck?
Because I wasn't convinced that he didn't have anything else in his mouth.
When did you mention something else? I mean, it was a battery.
Well, I don't know. I believe there was I did say at the beginning, or today, an article or a battery or something in his mouth.
Right.
And I'm only bracing his neck. I'm not choking him.
Your whole thesis, what you said to the police, what you said to the PSU was a battery. You didn't mention other articles. Here you are, on any showing, even if you believed up to that point in time he had a battery in his mouth, you knew full well by this stage there was no battery in his mouth because it was found elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, why have you still got your hands around his neck?
I was bracing his neck.
For what reason?
Because I felt it was, at the time, a safe position to have my hands to brace his neck.
Why?
I don't know. I just felt that this was safe. At that, I didn't release my hands from his neck at that point because I must have felt it wasn't appropriate to do so.
But why?
I don't
I
know.
want your explanation. Why?
I don't know. I felt it was safe.
You must have thought about this.
No, I haven't.
You never thought about it.
Why would I have to think about it?
Why? Because this has been hanging over you for all of this time. You know you've had to come here to give evidence.
Yeah.
Have you not thought about why it was, even after on any showing, it was clear to you that there was no battery in his mouth, you've still got your hands around his neck?
We'll carry on. Do you mind carry on playing it for a little bit?
If you want, yeah, by all means. Let's carry
Stop
on.
being a tool now, yeah? You're going to stop being an idiot. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no? Right.
My neck.
My neck.
Right, you're going to stop being a tool. Yes? Yes or no?
My neck. Nothing in my neck.
Right, now listen. Right, we're gonna release you, and then you're going to speak to healthcare. You understand? Do you understand? Yes or no? Yes or no?
It's just stop that. And this had nothing to do with the battery, and this had nothing to do with compliance, and this had nothing to do with control. You were punishing him.
So you say. So you say. That doesn't mean it's true.
No, nothing I say means it's true. It's a matter for the chair as to the findings that she makes. But this was punishment, wasn't it?
No, it was not.
To teach him a lesson.
No, it
Not
was
to
not.
behave in the way that you thought and others thought he was behaving. He was being a tool. He was being an idiot. He was acting like a mouse rather than a man. He was being a baby.
I never said that.
I'm not saying you did, but it was said in your presence while you still had your hands around his neck,
I was bracing his neck.
bracing him. You certainly thought he was acting like a child, a three-year-old,
yes, I
didn't
did.
you?
Yes, I did.
No room for sympathy for his mental ill health?
I had sympathy for him, and like I told you earlier today, I sat down with him earlier before this, and I sat down with him afterwards as well.
Yeah. And you've accepted that you knew he was vulnerable. You knew at least from the day before, when he had tied a ligature around his neck. You said to the police, we don't have to look at it, at page 14 in your interview, this is a vulnerable detainee. Those are your words, so you knew that. And did you know that he had refused food from the 19th of April?
No, I don't think so.
Can we put up on screen something different, please? You've seen this before, Mr. Bashali. Chair for you, tab 19, CPS 00002. John Collier. And if we go to page 3, please. This was one of a couple of reports he provided to Sussex Police. Paragraph 10 at the bottom. I've been asked to specifically review one incident that was recorded by a body-worn video camera. During an incident where physical force was used, the footage recorded, and he describes what he sees, proceeds to show DCO Pashali controlling the head of a detainee who was in the supine position. It would appear that staff are also controlling the arms of the detainee, although the footage is unclear on how they actually have control. I can confirm that the training manual is very prescriptive on how to control detainees on the floor, and that the medical advice previously taught is reiterated in any position that may be of heightened risk. Section 5 of the training manual covers in great depth how to control a detainee, and more importantly in this case, the role and application of techniques by the person controlling the head. The positioning of DCO Pashali is as that described and taught during training. The detainee is on his back and the knees of DCO Pashali are alongside the head. This is designed to prevent any excess movement of the detainee's head and reduce the risk of injury, either self-inflicted by the detainee or by the struggle taking place, and any resistance to the restraints being applied by the staff. The position of the hands within the manual and during training is described as number 1. Head support officer takes control of the team, places one hand on the forehead of the prisoner, in this case detainee, keeping the head securely on the floor without applying any undue pressure. And that was what you described in your PSU interview. The footage clearly shows the hand position being around the neck of the detainee and the thumbs of Pashali being driven into the neck or throat area. He then talks about a particular technique taught to staff known as the mandibular angle technique. I'm not going to read that paragraph, but it's there. Apart from the last few lines, the pressure used by Pashali was more to the centre of the neck and appeared to be either side of the windpipe. His actions appeared deliberate and not a simple misapplication of an approved technique. The verbal dialogue given by Pashali does not reflect the communication strategy expected of staff, rather than trying to calm the situation, encouraging the detainee to comply. He's offering a more confrontational attitude and offers little or no genuine effort to de-escalate the situation and to reassure the detainee that staff are acting in his best interests. When assessing the use of force evidenced on the footage against the general principles, it is difficult to establish why the potentially dangerous use of pressure around the neck area was used. The detainee was under control, staff didn't appear to be struggling. If the detainee had initially been at risk of self-harm, the staff would be fully justified in using force for this reason, and so on and so forth. Did you want to disagree with any of that, Mr. Pashali?
Yes.
And what is it you disagree with?
I'm just trying to look at my statement because I dealt with this in my statement.
You did deal with it?
But basically, how can he determine that any force or pressure was around the neck, firstly?
Yeah.
So how
first
he's,
of all,
how he's made
it's
that
his...
judgment, I don't know.
Right.
I didn't apply any pressure to the neck.
You applied no pressure. And what's the other criticism you have?
Sorry, if you could just give me a moment, please. Yeah.
Find the place that you need to in your statement, of course.
And if you're looking at your second statement, you deal with the 25th of April from your paragraph 5 onwards.
Sorry, just give me a moment.
Paragraph 27, perhaps.
Basically, what I also disagree with is that he mentions the MAT technique. I never stated that I was using the MAT technique, not
I'm
once.
sorry, you're dropping your voice.
He
Mr.
he said that suggested something about the MAT technique. I never ever said that I was using the MAT
No,
technique.
nor does he. He's simply pointing out.
But he's
technique
what
that
he's
might
not
be used.
covering. What he's not covering here is that there is no technique to cover. What do you do if someone is attempting to swallow something? There is no CNR technique for that. So you do what you feel is best at the time, which is what I've been trying to say.
Right.
And Mr. Collier, sorry, you can't hear me when I put my head down. I don't know if I'm allowed to read these bits out.
Yeah, read what you want.
When he was in an industrial tribunal for another situation.
Well, hold on a sec. I said read what you want, so I thought you were
Sorry.
going to read from paragraph 27.
Sorry.
In your witness statement, you
But
deal with, you simply borrow from judgments from employment tribunal cases where Mr. Collier was an expert witness.
Yes.
What's that got to do with anything? What's it got to do with this?
Is he allowed to speak to me like that? No, seriously.
Mr. Pashali, are you...
No, I will talk, but do you not think that's out of line? No.
I think... Could you repeat the question,
Yes,
please, Mr.
I'm
Whatman?
asking Mr. Pashali what a judgment in a completely unrelated, unconnected case in an employment tribunal on another occasion with entirely different facts has got to do with this.
Because it shows that in that case, the unrelated case that you're talking about, that he is allowing for those officers to do what they perceived was best at the time under the circumstances that they were in. And he has not allowed that for me.
So
I'm saying, what is the
biased?
difference?
So you
Well,
think
what's the
he's
difference?
biased?
Why is there a difference? Why is okay over here, but yet it's not okay for me? I did what I believed was best at the time.
You've made the point. Your statement has been adduced, Mr. Pashali, so anybody will be able to read what you have said, all right? And the reference is in your second statement at pages 5, 4, 5 and onwards. So that's available.
I have read your statement, Mr. Pashali, and I'm aware of the references that you make in there.
I'm just trying to make the point that why is it okay here for your expert to say that you do what's best at the time in a situation that there is maybe no technique, yet here it's definitely not the case.
Right. Thank you. You've made the point.
Thank you.
In another report, which I'm not going to put up, but is CPS 00004, at his paragraph 7, one of the other things Mr. Collier says is if this was a medical emergency, then the expectation is for staff to shout or alert others by saying medical emergency and he talks about training that's been provided. Did you think this was a medical emergency or not?
It was both.
It was both.
It
Both
was.
what?
It was both. It was. It was a restraint and it was a medical emergency.
Yeah. Mr. Collier deals with this in his entire inquiry report. And in his inquiry report, to save time, I'm not going to put it up on screen. But he points out at his paragraph 51 in INQ 000111 at pages 18 to 20, but this is paragraph 51, Rule 41, subparagraph 2, paragraph 2, provoking or punishing a detainee. Mr. Collier says your language was provoking, disrespectful and unprofessional. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
In addition, the language would cause further distress on the detainee, who was clearly in a state of crisis, and it could be interpreted that he was being punished by DCO Pashali when you consider the language used. Do you agree with that?
No.
You don't? You don't think it was punishment or is capable of amounting to words that sounded as if you were punishing him?
I wasn't punishing the detainee.
And he says this is the most concerning case, paragraph 52, based on the potential risk the technique used by Jan Pashali presented to him. Any pressure applied to the neck or throat area can result in serious injury, and techniques of this type form no part of the restraint syllabus. In addition, the professional standards expected of a DCO are not followed, and the demeaning and insulting language heard bring the agency into disrepute. You agree with that?
I didn't apply pressure to his neck. He's saying that the technique was not correct. There is no technique for that situation, and I didn't apply pressure to his neck.
Now, I'm going to move on to a different topic, Chair. I know it may be slightly early. If you want to take the break now, that may be as good a time as any.
Agreed. We'll return at 3:10.
Yeah. As a slight warning, I may go a little longer than 4:30. We'll see how far we get. But I'm going to ask if it's possible to avoid Mr. Pashali having to return tomorrow, if need be.
I assume that would be your preference, that we go slightly
yes,
later.
Please. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll return at 3:10. very much.
Mr. Bashali, I would like to put up on screen CJS 005534, chair behind tab 5 for you. A use of force form, which you will be familiar with. And this one was completed by Mr. Loughton in relation to the first of the three parts of the incident that we've been talking about. And if we go to page 8, he says that at around 8 minutes past 7, he was checking the daily food refusals, was on Eden Wing, just about to check a detainee, D1527, who was on constant supervision and Rule 40 and in E7. And he was told by the officer watching him, Fraser, that he'd just gone into the toilet, couldn't see him properly, entered the room, called his name, had no answer, went into the toilet area where he saw 1527 curled up around the toilet area in what looked like a ripped T-shirt around his neck, which he was holding on to, and he attempted to loosen the ligature, but 1527 was holding on to it, so I asked Fraser to pass me his fish knife, and I managed to cut the ligature off, and then pulled him out of the toilet area, sat him on the bed. And this is the use of force form for that part of the process. As you, I'm sure, appreciate, the inquiry has no other use of form report for any part of that incident. The only other note that the inquiry has, Mr. Prashali, if we can put another document up on screen, behind the next tab for you, Chair, tab 6, at pages 2 and 3, CJS 005964. So this is part of the ongoing record of observations on D1527 that day. We can see at the top at 1711, Fraser is on constant observations until 1801. At 1801, he hands over for around half an hour to DCO Qureshi. And if we scroll down, at 1833, he resumes Clayton Fraser observations on 1527. Over the page, please. Still on observations at 1852. And then at 1901, the last entry at that point by him, he has 1527 kicking and banging the door. And then this, there is a gap of 39 minutes in the record until 1940, seen in room 7, constant watch. 1527 had tied a T-shirt around his neck, angry, upset, had mobile phone battery in his mouth, attempted to self-strangulate in toilet. Visual observation only due to demeanour. Do you recognise who signed off on that? Who is RESP 16?
I don't know.
Does it mean responder?
I have no idea,
No.
sorry.
Would you accept that that is not an adequate note for the events which we have been discussing?
No, it's not adequate. I don't know who made that entry.
At 1956, so after this series of incidents was over, Fraser is back on constant observations. And while we're on it, let's just see how it played out that day. At 2015, is that an entry by you? 2015? Walking around the room looking for something to do, is that you, Jan?
Yes.
And then under that, 2020, tried to climb the wall, 3 exclamation marks, is that your entry?
It's got my name on it, so I'd say yes. I can't be
And then
certain.
Fraser's back on observations at 2022. He's just gotten back into his bed. 2033, sitting up in his bed, looking out of the door's window. And then 2042, he has just come to the window to ask if he could have a shower. 2048, in his bed, laying on his left side at present. And then 2 last entries from you at that point. 2100, allowed out for a shower while everyone else was locked up for roll count. And then 2110, in his room praying, said sorry. Now, first of all, he asked Fraser for a shower. Why was it you who allowed him out?
I don't know, I can't remember.
Yeah. And in your police interview, and you touched on this also in your PSU interview, you talked about his apologising to you. Is that right?
Yeah.
In your police interview, you talked about him apologising for the stress he'd put you through that day.
Yes.
So he was apologising, what, to you personally?
Yes.
For the stress?
Yes.
And at 2110, he's in his room praying, saying sorry. Sorry for the stress he'd put you through.
The entry was made at 2110.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that he said sorry at exactly 2110
Yeah.
and that he was praying in his room at 2110.
Yeah.
It would have happened between a window of, well, I don't even remember the time, but I made the entry at 2110.
You made the entry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the entry can't always be contemporaneous with the events it describes. I'm sure we would all accept that. It's your paragraph 25 of your second witness statement at page 4, where you say the interaction between yourself and him, documented in these notes, shows you had a good relationship. He apologised to me for the stress he'd put me through that day. He was under Rule 40, which meant he wasn't allowed out for a shower, and because of what he'd done that day, wasn't allowed out at all. If you check the rules of the establishment, no one is allowed out after 2100 hours, especially on E-Wing, and especially those on Rule 40. That was the rule at the time. I took a personal decision because of the relationship we had to let him have the shower because he wanted to pray and he wanted to be clean in order to do that. I remember we had a good conversation and hugged each other. I'm sure I said this in my police statement. But what you actually say in your PSU meeting was that he shook your hand. You don't say anything about hugging.
I can't remember exactly what was, but we had a good conversation.
Yeah.
And we shook hands, possibly hugged as well. I can't exactly remember, to be honest with you. But we had a good conversation.
But based on this note, in his room praying, said sorry, that's not you saying sorry to him for what you've done to him, because it doesn't say he said sorry. It simply says said sorry.
Oh, sorry, you take it to mean that I said sorry.
I'm asking you.
No, I didn't, sorry.
No,
he apologised to me.
He apologised to you. And you'll know, and let me deal with this, please, briefly. You'll know that in a witness statement he made to the police, and one he made for the purposes of litigation, paragraphs 33 to 34 of that particular statement, I'll give the reference for the record, HOM 303002221, pages 9 to 10, paragraphs 33 to 34, and you will have read this, Mr. Basharli. He said that you were somebody who was rude to him, treated him very badly, he felt you didn't like him, that on some other occasion you told him to get out of the shower after 2 minutes and didn't allow him to go to the mosque. And this is all some days before. So if he's being accurate in what he says,
May I stop you?
There's a contrast between
Yes.
what he says there and what you say of this entry in the notes.
I would like to interrupt you. If you look at that statement that you're reading,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly where, but you go further up, he describes the officer.
With a tattoo.
I have no tattoos on my
No,
head.
I know, but he's clearly describing you.
No, he's not. Sorry, does anyone see a tattoo on the side of my head?
Yeah, but you know.
Well, no, but he said in his statement,
Yeah.
the officer with the tattoo on the side of his head.
Yeah, but he's.
And I do recall, I don't know, I can't remember the guy's name, but I recall that officer. He is mistaken.
So you say he's talking about somebody entirely different?
I never stopped him from going to the mosque or allowed him,
Yeah.
or displayed
Yeah.
any
Well,
anti-Muslim behaviour or anything like that.
let's put this beyond doubt. Let's go then to the document. HOM 03 221 at page 9, tab 25, Chair. If we go to paragraph 33 on page 9, I kept asking to go, and although it's been redacted, I'm sure I can be forgiven for reading what's under it, to the mosque. For 2 days, I asked an officer called Yan, who would often be on E-Wing. I remember him very well, bald, relatively well-built, always very rude to me, treat me very badly, like I wasn't important to him at all. Made me feel like I was worthless, would seem to think that he was the boss, I was the prisoner, therefore he can do whatever he wants. I felt he didn't like me, don't know whether he didn't like me because I am Muslim, but I believe so. I asked Yan if I could go to the mosque, and he said, I'm not going to take you to the fucking mosque. This made me very upset. Going to the mosque would help me feel better and would help me take my mind off what had happened to me in Egypt. So you will accept, Mr. Pashali, nothing about tattoo there, but if we go to another document, the statement he made to the...
When was this statement made? Was it after the programme?
Yes, I'm sure
Yes.
it is.
So, I feel...
And maybe I can be helped from behind as to what the date of the statement was. But the statement you have in mind is a different one. It's the one he made to the police on the 11th of December 2017, tab 16, Chair, SXP 000145. SXP 000145. That's the statement he made to the police on the 11th of December. And if we turn to the next page, later the same day, I don't remember the time, I do remember that I was strangled. When it happened, I know there were at least 6 people around me all shouting, and there was lots going on, which makes it difficult for me to remember exactly who did what and when and who was there. I do know that a male staff member called Yan or Dan or similar, muscular looking, like he goes to the gym, a little bit taller than me, shaved head or bald, and has a tattoo on the side of his head, normally works on E-Wing, and is the same male who told me to get out of the shower after 2 minutes. I think it was Dan or Yan who said, I'm not taking you to the fucking mosque. Some days earlier, I got the feeling this man didn't like me because he always spoke to me like this. I've tried remembering what happened, but I was having flashbacks and panic attacks. There was a lot going on. I know I was strangled, and I really felt like I was going to die. I felt pressure around my neck, and I was struggling to breathe. Now, do you want to dispute that he's talking about you? Just because he mentions a tattoo on the side of the head?
Yes, no, 100%.
100%.
I did take him to the mosque. I did let him out for showers. It wasn't me who was rude to him in relation to his religion or his showers or going to the mosque.
So it's a misidentification by him?
I think it's more than that now. After the programme, he's seen an opportunity, and he's taken the opportunity to put all of this on myself.
I see. In your second witness statement, you said, or you suggested his solicitors had guided him.
Yes, I believe so.
That's what you believe, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I believe so. It's because there is, I believe, a civil case pending against me, which they mentioned in the first part of the inquiry. So there is also a financial gain for the detainee.
Coming back to use of force reports, can we please go back to one of the transcripts? We don't have to watch it unless you particularly want to. But if we go back, please, to TRN 000002, which is tab 36. Page 12 to begin with, please. Page 12. And then at line 88, So it's the right-hand column towards the bottom, or perhaps a little above. Callum Tully and you were having a conversation long after this is over. Sorry, Jan, mate, you know what I'm fucking like with a CNR. Do you know what I'm saying? And you say, no, listen, that wasn't a CNR really. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. What was it about what had happened that did not make it a CNR?
Well, because it was, as I said to you earlier today, it was CNR and it was a medical emergency. He was committing an act of self-harm at the same time. And I was just trying to sort of help convince Callum that he hadn't done anything wrong.
Well, what he is saying, or is apparently confessing to you, is that he doesn't think he's any good at doing CNR.
Yes, I
So
agree.
you say to him, that wasn't a CNR really.
I was just trying to comfort him.
So that's all that was. You weren't saying actually that this was way outside any recognised use of force. That's not what you're saying.
Well, I was just trying to say to him, don't worry about it.
And then on the next page, 13, Derek Murphy comes on the scene, and then a little further down at line 38, Callum Tully says, oh, did the nurse see what you were doing? I don't know. Was he talking to you at that point?
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know.
Well, let's look at the top of the next page. Sorry, you see what I mean? Because I told you to ease off. Well, you're the only person he told to ease off, so he must have been addressing you.
Yeah, sorry, where am I looking at?
Top of page 13, line 50. Sorry, you see what I mean? Because I told you to ease off. He's talking to you, isn't he? But I don't want you thinking that I'm just, a pussy. Do you know what I mean? No. Did the nurse see what you were doing?
Sorry, where's the bit where it says, where did the nurse see what I was doing?
Bottom left, line 38, 39.
Right, I don't know if he was talking to me. He was talking to me up here. And he's made a comment about him being a pussy, and I've said, no.
Yeah. And then page 14 at the top, you say, where are you going? Some other staff says, I'm going out to the courtyard, get some fresh air. Give us a couple of minutes. Tully, yeah, mate, no worries. And then you, as it stands, no use of force as it stands. And he responds, no use of force report, okay. You were telling him that there should be no record of what you had done.
No, that's not correct.
Well, what does it mean?
It means as it stands.
Well, as it stands, what does that mean?
It means as it stands, we're busy at the moment. We haven't got the time to do a use of force, as it stands.
What were you doing instead?
I don't know, I can't remember, but we were obviously busy at the time.
Well,
As I said to you at the beginning of the day, we are not relieved from our places of work in order to go and have the 45-minute break and carry out uses of force. So you fit them in where you can. Hence, as it stands.
Yeah.
I didn't say, no, we're definitely not doing a use of force report.
Well, wouldn't then the more appropriate thing to have said to him, if that's true, be later when you feel up to it?
Well, I said as it stands.
Yeah, well, because as it stands, Mr. Pashali, there is no use of force report, is there?
For the other staff, no, there isn't. I carried
Not
out.
for you.
Yeah, I know. I carried out a use of force report, and I left it on the desk.
The desk of where?
E-wing office. Yeah, I believe so, in the pigeonhole.
Well, you actually said two things, and if needs be, we can go to it. At one stage, you were telling the PSU you left it on a desk. At another stage, you said you left it in a pigeonhole. And I think you told the police you left it in a pigeonhole.
The pigeonhole, what I mean by a pigeonhole is that there is a tray on the desk that we call a pigeonhole, and you put the pieces of paperwork in that tray.
And what did that use of force form say?
I can't remember now, but it would have been describing the incident and my actions. That's what you normally do with a use of force.
Yeah, we've seen lots of them. And what do you think it said about your neck brace?
It would have said that I was bracing his neck.
Did it also add, I whispered in his ear, you fucking piece of shit, because I'm going to put you to fucking sleep?
I genuinely can't remember. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have put that in because no, it isn't. the right thing to say or do, but I can't remember.
So somewhere there is a use of force, what, an Annex A that you completed,
An incident report.
an internal report.
An incident report.
Incident report.
Use of force form,
So
incident
not
report.
the type of use of force report we just saw that was completed by Mr. Loughton.
He's a manager, so I don't know if he would complete a slightly different form to what we would do.
So somewhere on a desk you left behind an incident report, not a use of force report.
A use of force report, incident report, same thing.
Well, they're not, because an incident report is headed incident report,
Okay,
and a use of force
I-
report is
Okay.
what we just saw.
I filled out a use of force report.
Right. So what, one with a red cover
I can't remember.
and with an Annex A where you make your statement and you set out your report, setting out exactly what happened.
Yes, I can't remember the colour of the report.
You see, if there was such a report, Mr. Bashali, it's never been found. You know that, don't you?
I'm fully aware of that, yes.
How is that possible?
Shall I just tell you exactly what I think?
You say exactly
I
what
believe Callum Tully took that report and got rid of it.
Sounds a bit conspiratorial, doesn't it, Mr.
Well, it does,
Bashali?
but the only person telling people not to do a use of force report
Yeah.
is Callum Tully.
Really?
And that's referenced in a Home Office report.
Yeah. Well, we'll come to something else in a minute, but these are your words, not his. As it stands, no use of force.
As it stands. But the only person going around and telling other staff not to do a report was Callum Tully.
Right. So you think that Callum Tully has somehow found the report that you completed.
It's just there on the desk. That's
Well,
how we used to leave them.
Not in an envelope?
No, this is exactly, I believe I've made this point somewhere in my statement, that there was no, again, procedure, which there should have been, for such documents to be put somewhere secure. I'm sure I've made reference to this.
Yeah. So somehow he...
It was not somehow, he just walked, he would have walked, anyone could have walked in and picked it up off the table.
Yeah. And just got rid of it.
For his own interest, yeah.
But what would his interest be? Because, you know, here he was, undercover reporting for the BBC to show the abuse that was taking place at Brook House. What was his interest, Mr. Bashali, in making disappear a use of force form report that you were completed, which you probably think was incomplete? What would
Sorry,
be the
where did I say it was incomplete?
Because you said you probably would have left out.
I
you
don't
fucking
know for
piece of shit.
sure, but I probably would have left that out because, it's
So
not a good comment.
what interest would any rational person have doing the job he was doing undercover in making disappear evidence that would underlie the whole substructure of the BBC's Panorama programme in due course, not merely abuse taking place, but cover-ups?
So
I don't understand.
you're actually telling me that you don't understand the benefit to him getting rid of that use
You
of
explain it, Mr. Bashali.
Because he is trying to paint things in a certain light.
Yeah.
For example, if he genuinely believed that I committed attempted murder that day, and he was very upset about it, and that I choked the detainee and I strangled him and all the rest of it, when he goes home, the first thing he does is do another piece to camera. Would anyone else not phone the police almost immediately after witnessing an attempted murder? But he didn't do that. No one reported it to the police until after the programme. So there is his motivation, the programme.
But that's a different motivation. The
Well,
motivation...
the motivation is the same, I think.
No. Well, I'm trying to ask you, Mr. Bashali, what was his interest in getting rid of evidence? Because that's a serious allegation.
Yes, it is a serious allegation. I understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. And if you go on to page 15, just to see this through, it's then that he's having a conversation with the nurse, Jo Buss, at line 59. Are they putting that down as a restraint? I think as it stands, and so he's echoing the words you used. According to what Jan has just told me, they're going to leave it. I don't know, though. You'll have to speak to Jan. Where's he gone? Upstairs? I think he's gone for a cigarette. It's going to be down to Dixie, really. I'm not sure. And on the next page, write basically, well, I can't write any more anyway because Jan's not going to let me, says Jo Buss. I can't even write, sure. A T-shirt round his neck, angry and upset. He made phone battery in his mouth, attempted to self-strangulate on the toilet. Observations only due to demeanour. yeah, that's all I can say, isn't it? He still hasn't been done properly, so I don't know. And then she says at the top of the next column on page 16, I'll go and write War and Peace upstairs, I think. Well, any idea why she thought Jan isn't going to let me?
No, I never spoke to Joe Buss about the reports. And what I
Sorry.
don't understand...
I do apologise. I'm sorry, Chair. I'm sorry, Mr. Altman. There's been a correction in the last couple of days, which is quite material to the information that's just been stated. I wonder if we could take a 5-minute break for me to explain the position.
Mr. Altman.
I've no idea what's being spoken of at all. And
Well-
this hasn't been brought to my attention, whatever. But I'd rather you say no more. And I'll invite you to rise for a few minutes and I'll find out what's being said, because I have no idea at the moment.
Okay, agreed. Thank you. I shall rise for 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Chair, with thanks to Mr. Stanton, if we go back, we have still up on screen. I can't write any more anyway because Jan's not going to let me. Apparently, the footage has been listened to again, or the audio track has been listened to again. And as I understand it, it should be because my hand's not going to let me. Apparently, Jo Buss had a problem with her writing hand. So the transcript is wrong.
Okay. That's an important point of clarification then. Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you.
Let's go then to the next transcript, please. TRN 0000003. This is slightly later at tab 37, Chair. And at the top left, it says, Tully, are we going to use force? Jan, that come from Dixie, so that's cool, yeah. And then the pair of you discuss other things. Did Steve Dix have anything to do with not writing up any use of force forms for this particular activity with D1527 that evening?
I don't recall even seeing Steve Dix. Not saying that I didn't, but I don't recall seeing him. And I can't see Steve Dixie as a manager advising people not to write a use of force form.
When he gave evidence to the inquiry on the 1st of December last year, Callum Tully said he thought you'd confirmed it with Steve Dix that use of force forms weren't required.
That's not true.
Can you explain why no one else completed a use of force form that evening, including Callum Tully? Charlie Francis, who had hands on, he didn't. Any idea at all why that would happen? How that happened?
I could only put it down to if they didn't have the time to complete the form. Other than that, I don't know.
Or a cover-up?
No.
As you know, Mr. Collier deals with this, but I'm not going to take you through that. But he obviously makes clear it was a requirement for there to be use of force reports after what happened. But I'm sure you've read that, and I'm not going to ask you anything about that. One thing I do want to ask you about, though, is something else that Callum Tully said in a witness statement that he made to the police, which I hope you will have seen. Mr. Pashali, tab 10, Chair, SXP 000120. Sorry, it's not 10. It's 15. Tab 15, 23rd of November 2017. And if we go to page 6 at the bottom, please. Once I'd left the room, I went to the toilet to compose myself as this upset me. I returned to the wing office where Jan was, spoke to him. He then said, as it stands, no use of force. I repeated it back to him, no use of force report. He then said, yeah, as it stands, hold fire, or words to that effect. Jan then left the office as Jo Buss entered. She said to me, are you writing that down as a use of force? I replied, according to what Jan said, no, as it stands. Jo Buss replied to me, stating she couldn't write due to a bad hand, and then read out what she had written. Assessment by duty nurse, continued observations due to demeanour and attempted self-strangulation. She then informed me that she was going to her office to write War and Peace. I remained in the office for a while before leaving. I could see Clayton still observing 1527 at the far end of the wing. Jan was also sat down there too. I went down to where Jan was and spoke to him. I apologised for being a wimp. About CNR, control and restraint, he then told me that when he was a prison officer at HMP Wandsworth, that as a group of prison officers they would cut people to make it look as though they were self-harming. He took pleasure in telling me this story as though it should impress me. I said something similar to, "Can't get away with that here," to which Jan replied something similar to, "Yes, you can with the right management." Do you accept you said things along the lines of you would cut people to make it look as if they were self-harming?
I can't remember exactly what I said, but I know that for me, Callum was always, as I've said in my statements, I'm sure you've read, was always fishing for stories. And yeah, I gave him stories and made things up, and it was a joke to me at the time.
Right.
I regret it now, but I thought he was just fascinated by these types of stories, so the more he asked, the more I embellished.
Well, what about where he said, "Can't get away with that here," to which you replied something along the lines of, "Yes, you can with the right management"? Did you mean that?
I don't recall saying that, but if I did, I was winding him up. I was basically, excuse my language, I was taking the piss out of him. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but that's what that was. He seemed so keen and so interested and just always asking me stuff like that.
Yeah. So you say you were feeding him a number of false stories because he was so keen to hear them?
Basically, yeah.
Tall stories?
Yes. There would be bundles of evidence if any of that happened. I wouldn't have been able to go through the best part of 10 years as a prison officer behaving like that, and there would be reports, you would find some evidence of that.
Yeah. Can we look at a couple of other transcripts, please, Mr. Pashali? One I'd like to take you to for Tuesday the 9th of May, Chair tab 40, TRN 0000077. Page 40. And here, Mr. Pashali, can you just scroll down for a moment, please? Chair, this is not the right one. It's been revised. And I'm not sure if the evidence handler has been given the right one. It's been recently revised, the transcript. It's not the right one. Let's see if we can make do. Here you were having a conversation with Callum Tully and Derek Murphy, and the date is the 9th of May, as I indicate. And you're talking about a detainee. If we go to the top of the page, D87. He may not be on your list, but don't worry about it. And you are having a conversation. Do you remember we looked at this a little earlier? Mate, this is the honest truth. He said, "My heart is hurting. I miss you. I miss my mummy and daddy." Do you remember we looked at this a little earlier?
Yes.
Actually, it might be the right one. And let's just scroll down a bit. Do you see about a third of the way up? I can't play chess with you all day. And we looked at that earlier. He would follow me to the toilets. I went one day, I went down there. He went, "Where are you going?" "I'm going for a fucking piss." And one of the detainees says, "Do you want to hold it for him, honestly?" You say, "It's not, is it, fuck's sake?" And then Murphy says, "I said to him, mate, you're doing my fucking head in, mate. You give me a fucking headache listening to you. He just wants to be, to you, fucking be available is wrong. It should be afraid of him, you know.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, it should
You
be.
see
what?
the word available. He just wants you to fucking be available. It shouldn't be available. It should be afraid of him. He just wants you to fucking be afraid of him, you know. Who? Says Tully. Murphy says, she said to me, are you afraid of him? Do you remember him saying that? And he says, I wouldn't fancy having a fight with him, though, I've got to say. You say it's fair enough. And then you say, I'd love to get in the ring with him, put the gloves on, see what he's fucking made of. I'd love to. He's got shoulders. His chest is, according to the transcript, titty. He's got a gut. His arms ain't all that. He's just got some shoulders and a bit of height. Fucking crack him straight in the ribs. And that's something that actually we see you say on the 25th of April. It's the kind of thing that you say. I've not taken you to it. In the third transcript for the 25th of April. What was the point of this sort of conversation?
It was just a stupid BS conversation. I don't dispute that I said it. I mean, we often spoke in that way, as I said, swearing and so on. And I said, I'd like to get him in the ring and just to see what he's made of as a contest, as a boxing match. Nothing illegal about that.
No.
Again, not distasteful, I'd agree with you. But it was just a BS conversation.
BS meaning what? Bullshit?
Bullshit, just a bullshit conversation.
And then it carries on in that vein with you and Murphy in particular swapping stories about scrapes that you've been in. I'm not particularly interested in that. And if you go to page 42, and if you look at halfway down, you see Callum Tully is talking about MMA, aren't you into? You say, no, see the stories, look, see MMA.
Sorry, just
At
give me
the
a
bottom.
second. Sorry, just give me a second. MMA. You're right.
Towards the bottom.
Yeah.
What was that? He said, I was into MMA. Everybody's got a thing about MMA at the moment. Can we scroll it down, please? And Derek Murphy says, see, this is what I was saying to you. And then Tully turns the conversation this way, fucking putting people in sleep holes. And Pashali says, oh, I forgot you witnessed that. Oh, it was so funny, Derek. I wrapped up this fella right. Murphy, I remember. You say getting upset. Tully, I weren't getting upset. I was blowing up my arse, you prick. No, but I'm choking him. And he's going, I thought 10 more seconds, you're going to sleep. He's like, Yan, I think that's enough. Do you know what I've got, this? And according to the recording, you mimic choking. Don't worry about it. And you mimic choking. I shat myself, I'm not going to lie. The nurse was right behind you, Jan, so that's why I didn't. Now, it's good because obviously she's fucking not going to lie, but now, if that's the exchange that you all had, it rather suggests that you were several days later, on the 9th of May, making fun of what had happened, what you had done. I'm choking him, your words. 10 more seconds, you're going to sleep.
Can I interrupt or not?
And it was so funny, Derek.
Earlier on in this transcript that you've said, it refers to me putting him in a choke hold.
Sleep hold.
Sleep hold. I didn't put the detainee in a sleep hold. I braced his neck. But in regards to this whole conversation, it's just another example of me winding Callum up. I was just reacting to the way he was behaving about incidents and basically taking the piss out of him. And I've said I shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry for that. But that is all that is. He appeared to be at the time easy to wind up.
As you said earlier, you didn't know you were being recorded, did you?
Exactly.
But when you say, no, but I'm choking him,
I wasn't choking anyone.
I thought 10 more seconds, you're going to sleep. I mean, these are your words.
Yeah, they are, and I was winding him up. I could see the reaction on his face, that it was At the time, I found it amusing.
You found it amusing to wind him up and tell Derek Murphy it was funny.
Basically, it was banter. I mean, as I told you earlier today, the place, the environment, the culture, as we've already discussed, it wasn't good, and this is an example of that.
On other occasions, do you accept? You said, let's see if I can find the place. Yes, let's turn on to page 45. About halfway down, this is where you're still having a conversation about it. Just before halfway down, you say, because I thought he'd start crying. Who said that? Says another unidentified officer. It's very difficult to explain. Callum's had a taste. He didn't cry, but he got a bit upset. What was the taste he had, Mr. Bashali?
Because he had approached a number of staff saying that he wanted to be involved in CNRs. So I would assume I meant he's getting involved in CNRs.
I didn't cry. I was tired, Jan. I was fucking knackered. You didn't see me having to try and pull him out of the toilet. Callum, hear me out. When you saw him, I said, you didn't cry. Yeah, I know I didn't. But you got a bit upset. I didn't say you cried. What I'm trying to explain is the likes of us. If these guys see us in full action, they'd be delighted. What does that mean?
Sorry, what did it say? They'd be delighted.
Yeah. What I'm trying to explain is the likes of us, if these guys see us in full action, they'd be delighted. What does that mean?
I don't know. As I said, I was winding Callum up. He was easy to wind up.
Try me, mate. I'd love to watch it, says somebody else. We don't cringe at breaking bones. No, that's some. Just let me finish. Murphy says, no, that's. And you say, if I killed, I wouldn't be bothered. I'd carry on. A lot of people are freaked out when you, not you, but like proper bit scared. Why'd you say that?
I've just explained to you, and to show that it's sort of in line with the conversation and me taking the piss out of him, he said, it says there, they'd be delighted. Try me, mate. So to me, I'm thinking he wants more, so I gave him more.
It sounds a little like...
Well, he says, try me, mate, doesn't it?
Sounds a bit like you're glorifying in what you did.
I'm just taking the piss out of him, but you're just going to ignore the fact that he says, try me, mate. I'm telling you, he was... I don't know if interested is the right word, but he seemed to feed off of it, and I was winding him up, I was taking a piss, I shouldn't have, so I did, I embellished. I mean, obviously, I don't want to kill anybody, and I've never killed anybody in my life. And if I was that way inclined, again, not just throughout my working life, surely you'd have records of me basically not being able to go down to Tesco's and buy a pint of milk without smashing someone. I was winding him up.
And so winding him up when, if we look at one of his video diaries, TRN 0000039, at page 29, chair tab 39. If we look halfway down, so Jan was basically telling me what he and his colleagues used to do when they worked at Wandsworth. Smash prisoners' heads onto sinks, sometimes so hard that the sink in the cell would break. Told me they'd slash prisoners' arms with razor blades to make it look like they'd self-harm to justify use of force. Said that they kicked prisoners' heads in and just generally beat the living daylights out of some of the prisoners at Wandsworth.
I mean, listen to that. You've just read it out. Come on.
Do you accept you said that?
I don't accept that I said it. I may have said it. I don't know. It's in line with the rest of the stuff that I've said.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said that. But just listen to what you've read out. Are you telling me that any of you in this inquiry are going to believe for a second that if any of that had happened, that there wouldn't be a report or a police investigation or something somewhere, that I've managed to cover up all of those things in 10 to 12 years?
I think you're missing the point, Mr. Bashali.
Sorry, what's the point?
But the point is, in saying these things to Callum Tully and presumably others, aren't you building a legend of a culture at Brook House?
Oh, you're blaming the culture on me. That's where you're going with it. Right?
You
I
were
disagree.
part of the culture and you were presenting yourself as the alpha male.
No, that's not true. The only person who was interested in such stories was Callum Tully.
So are you saying...
I don't recall anyone else being so interested.
You saying if Callum Tully hadn't been at Brook House, we would never see any conversations like this?
No, not like that. Not at all.
So this was all for Callum Tully's benefit?
He was. I don't know how else to say it. He was fishing for this kind of information. I didn't know at the time what was going on, so I thought it was a joke to elaborate. I mean, I remember discussing it with other staff, saying how far do you reckon how extreme can we make this sound? And he believes it. I mean, do you not accept? I know I'm not allowed to ask you a question, but do you not accept if any of that happened, there'd be a record of it?
As I said, Mr. Bashali, that's not the point I'm making. I'm making a different point. Can we look, please, at the PSU investigation report briefly? Chair, for you, it's at T, tab 23. It's CJS 001107. I assume you've seen this, Mr. Bashali. It's the professional standards unit of the Home Office's inquiry report into what we have been mostly discussing during the course of your evidence. And if we can go, please, to page 21 and see how they dealt with it. Page 21 at the bottom. The allegation in bold at 7.32 to investigate the alleged assault on D1527 on the 25th of April by you, seen in the panorama program footage to be kneeling over 1527 with his hands around his neck, choking and verbally abusing him. And then the report under review just recites the evidence it's received, and at page 24 concludes, DCO Pashali didn't acknowledge that his actions were wrong and his account of events was shown to be untruthful. Therefore, there was no credibility to his explanations. Pashali threatened to put D1527 to sleep while he used non-approved restraint techniques and appeared to dig his fingers into his neck while he struggled to breathe, while he was held by two other officers. This was not in accordance with any Home Office policy of procedure. Therefore, on balance, the allegation that DCO Pashali assaulted and threatened him was substantiated. And they comment there is an ongoing police investigation to consider whether his actions were criminal. Tully and Francis were aware of the actions of Pashali as they happened. They didn't intervene and assist him, even though they both later stated Pashali's actions were life-threatening. These officers also failed to comply with their obligations under the detention centre rules to report their abuse to their managers and the Home Office. And I'm going to skate over the next couple of pages, other than to recite the allegation at 7:50 that you directed the nurse not to write up the incident and officers talking about the incident in a derogatory fashion afterwards.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I know you don't like it, but I think we can agree with what's happened this afternoon that's not correct.
I'm agreeing that what she said was not as transcribed.
Thank you.
On page 26, the conclusion there was evidence of the conversation between Tully and Pashali, in which Pashali suggested to Tully that no use of force report was to be completed. The other officers deny there was any agreement not to write a use of force report, but it seemed more than a coincidence that Francis and Fraser would both decide in isolation not to write a use of force report against policy. All officers therefore failed to comply with the detention centre rules. It was Tully, not Pashali, who advised Nurse Buss not to refer to the restraint, and this is what you were talking about earlier, and he didn't correct her or ask her to include the restraint in her records when she read this to him. That's not to say that Nurse Buss had to oblige. She did record the 2 incidents of self-harm on the 25th of April, although her records were vague, and it appeared this was done with the intention not to raise attention to the restraint used on 1527. Therefore, it was considered on the balance of probabilities that there was collusion by the G4S staff not to record the events in accordance with policy and procedure, and they therefore substantiated the allegation. I assume you don't agree with that?
Obviously, I don't agree, no.
Just a few other things, Mr. Pashali, and then you'll be finished. First of all, on 2 occasions in 2 different recordings, we have on the 27th of May an officer by the name of Dave Webb. Does that name mean something to you, Dave Webb? During the preparations for a use of force intervention on another detainee on that day, the 27th of May, so a month and a bit after the events we've been dealing with. Do you remember that footage about how to use a shield in
Yes.
one of the rooms, the staff
Yes.
room? And Dave Webb apparently saying, if he dies, he dies. And you were present, I think, in the room at the time. If he dies, he dies. Is that something that officers said from time to time?
It's not something that I remember being said a lot. I don't remember him saying that. But I can tell you now he didn't mean that.
No. On the 14th of June, when another detainee, D1275, had taken spice and it was a medical emergency, you may remember this. Derek Murphy saying, I've got absolutely no sympathy for him. If he dies, he dies. And so that's a second instance of that sort of thing being said. Yeah?
Was I present for the second one?
No, but I'm just giving you an example
Okay.
of one of the things
So I wasn't present.
which seems to be a recurring pattern.
You're saying it's a recurring pattern. I didn't hear it that much. In fact, I don't recall hearing it at all.
So
But
you've never heard anything like
I
that?
can't remember. It was a very long time ago. I'm not. It doesn't surprise me if it was said, but I'm almost certain it wasn't said every day or 3 times a week or something like that.
Can we go to another document, please? And we're not a million miles away from finishing, Mr. Pashali, so bear with me. Chair CPS 000025, at page 13. It's your tab 31.
Thank you.
And if we scroll to the bottom, please, this is the BBC incident log. And we see the date, Thursday the 20th of April. So, in fact, it's 4 days before Callum Tully first successfully started recording. And if we look in the second part of it, Echo Wing 1150, man on hunger strike came back. A cipher's been applied to his name, D2159, Pakistan. DCO Yan was sat outside on constant supervision, just started talking, Jan said during conversation, don't care if he lives or died, or words to that effect, and then activities ended, returned later on, came out to get food, but there was no servery worker, and so on and so forth. So,
Sorry, where does this come from? Where
this
is
the
this?
BBC incident log. It's information.
What does that mean, incident log? Is it a recording or is it someone who's written that down?
I thought I'd made clear this wasn't at a time when the recording had started, but these were notes taken, sourced from Callum Tully of what took place on the 20th of April. And one of the things he recalled was you saying of somebody who was on constant supervision that you didn't care if he lived or died. And that's why I was asking you about the other two examples, whether this was just a pattern or it just was, in effect, a coincidence, if you accept you said that, of three different people saying much the same thing on three different occasions.
I'm not going to sit here and support something that Callum has just written up without no evidence. I've already told you it wasn't a common practice saying or a line that was used all the time. Again, you would have it on footage all the time, wouldn't you?
Well, I told you why there was no footage, because he didn't record.
Yes, but when he was recording, you would have, if this was common practice, you would have it
Well,
when he was recording.
He did, he had it twice.
It wasn't twice. It wasn't every day of the week. I don't recall that saying being a commonplace saying or a pattern of behaviour of the saying, and I definitely dispute whatever Callum's just written up here.
Yeah. Finally, let me ask you about this, because in both your witness statements, your first and your second, you make a number of allegations and assertions about Callum Tully and his motivations.
Yes.
In your first witness statement, you'll remember, and I'll give the references at paragraph 118, you say security was an issue at Brook House because you were able to bring prohibited items into the centre, which would ordinarily, because he was able to bring prohibited items into the centre, which would ordinarily be punishable by a prison sentence for anyone else. So I think the point you were making is that he was able to bring past security a camera and recording equipment, which, if it had been anybody else, would have been punished.
Well, not if it had been anybody else, but if security was how it should have been, no one would be able to bring in a camera, would they? That's my point.
But you added would ordinarily be punishable by a prison sentence for
believe,
anyone else.
Unless I'm wrong, I believe bringing in equipment like that to an establishment holds a prison sentence.
And then in your second witness statement, in relation to events on the 25th of April, at paragraph 6, you said he had an agenda and wished to sensationalise situations and incidents. Do you hold to that view?
Yes.
At paragraph 9, you blamed the BBC and Tully for making a programme that didn't portray the whole truth
Yes.
of what happened. At paragraph 26, you said he was on constant observations on D1527 and should have made some observation regarding the incidents. What did you mean by that?
Well, I would hope that you would agree with me, because you've said it today in the evidence that Callum took over on constant observations at some point. I can't remember when. I don't expect to go back to it, but I'm hoping you'll give me that. You read that out today, that he was on constant obs at some point and he made no observations.
Well, he wasn't actually. What he was is Nathan Ring simply asked him to look over D1527's room, and it was almost immediately that the third part of the incident occurred. It was Clayton Fraser who was on constant observations.
He took over constant obs.
So that's what you say.
I know he took over constant obs.
Anyway, so what's the observation he should have made?
Well, he should have made an entry. Any entry.
An entry, so that's what you're saying.
If you're on a constant obs for a period of time, you should make an entry.
Okay. At paragraph 31, you say Mr. Collier had reached a biased view of the events of the 25th of April based on the filming, Callum Tully's filming and Callum Tully's emotions. Is that what you believe?
Yes, I do believe that. And I'll try to provide examples, which you obviously didn't want to hear earlier.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Pashali. At paragraph 45, you deny telling him not to write a report. Yeah?
Yes.
And then you stand by that. At 48, you say in that regard it was clear he had an agenda which wasn't the welfare of detained persons. Yes? You hold to that? That Callum Tully didn't care about the detainees.
If Callum Tully cared about detained persons, and he genuinely believed what I did, number one, he would have pulled me off the incident, and anyone else in that room for that matter, and number two, surely he would have gone straight to the police with such a serious allegation. You don't wait till after your programme has been aired.
At paragraphs 58 through to 61, you said he showed, well, this is the effect, I think, of what you were saying, no duty of care towards D1527, and that, unlike you, he didn't release the ligature and he failed to contact the police. So those are the points you're making.
Which I've
so
just made,
much of
yeah.
what you've just said. He burst into tears, but gave a piece to camera with fantastic effect.
When he went home, straight away. So he's finished his shift, he's gone home, and I don't mean to reiterate, but obviously I'm saying, surely you would go straight to the police.
No, you say that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And at paragraphs 64, 67, 69, 75, 85, 86, 89, 91, 93 and 94, you say he was always fishing for stories.
Yes.
How was he fishing for stories?
He was just always very interested in these things and asking me questions about it. And just always around. He wouldn't be where he was supposed to be. He was just fascinated by it.
Yeah. You wouldn't say, Jan, tell us a story.
I don't think it was in that way. I can't
But
remember.
you were willing to oblige at any time just to trot out stuff that would be of interest to him.
I've said this, and I apologise when it's wrong, and I realise that I was taking a piss out of him, and I thought it was a joke. I'm not saying that was right, but that's what happened.
Of course, we have to look at that through the lens of you not knowing that he was recording you. We have to remember that, don't we?
Well, if I'd have known he was recording me,
you would have said that.
obviously the joke's on me, isn't it? I'm sitting here now.
And at 66, 73 and 74, you denied committing any of the acts you say he was claiming, but what you really mean is you deny committing any of the acts in the stories that you were claiming. In other words, the stories about pretending that prisoners had self-harmed when you'd beaten them up, that kind of story, you were saying you'd never done any of that, which you've already just told us for the reasons you've given.
I also denied the allegation that he's made that what I did to the detainee, yes.
What are you
To
talking about there?
the incident that we've been talking about.
You're talking about 1527, so that's what you mean, is it?
I mean everything.
Everything. And finally, at paragraph 113 and 114, you said that officers said things in front of him because they got a reaction.
I believe so.
What was the reaction?
Just he wanted to hear more, and he seemed fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I don't know if impressed by it's the right word, possibly. It was a long time ago, I can't remember.
So, what, all of this just designed to make the place look bad?
No, I think he, knowing that he's recording people in order to make a programme, he wanted to get something that would be, I don't know how else to describe it, something, fascinating to watch. If it was boring, no one would want to watch it. So he tried to get something as good as he could.
You're not saying, Mr. Pashali, are you? And I think you've made that clear, that the picture Mr. Donnelly painted was a true one, are you? You're not saying what Mr. Donnelly told us. You've already made that clear.
Were you talking about the guy that was here yesterday?
Yeah. It's a true
No,
picture.
I agree. I don't agree that he's... No, yes.
But by the same token, you're also saying that the material presented by Panorama was not fairly representative of Brook House as a whole. Is that what you're telling us?
I think you can say both statements. He had an opportunity to really show the problems, and he decided to go with what would be more dramatic, more sensational, and highlighting the real, not the real issues, but the issues that would actually help detainees. And I don't know all of the evidence that's been gathered, so I don't know what other people have done or have not done. But I'm talking about from my perspective and from what I know.
I mean, you're not saying he manufactured what happened to D1527 on the 25th of April, are you?
No, but it's been... he's attempted to make it look like I attempted to murder him.
Well,
and
has
I'm
he?
telling you, well,
Has he, or is it your words, Mr. Pashali, that...
Well, that's what you're alluding to today, and that's what the Panorama programme has alluded to, and that's what the Home Office has alluded to as a result of the Panorama programme.
But you think you've been dealt an unfair hand, that you were only doing what you did in the best interests of that man at the time.
I do feel I've been dealt an unfair hand, but I accept that I should not have used the words that I used.
Yeah. But you don't accept that the physical part of what you did was also inappropriate.
No, because I didn't put pressure around his neck. I wasn't trying to throttle him or choke him or strangle him.
Well, I'm not going to go around the houses on that again. Chair, that's all I have to ask Mr. Pashali, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. I do just have a few brief ones, and I realise it's been a really long day, so they are brief. Based on your memory, were there many other officers at Brook House who had previous experience, either in an immigration setting or in a prison background? And I'm not expecting you can remember specific numbers, but...
There was a few, but there weren't many. A handful, maybe. But people came and went quite frequently and would leave the job. If I was to hazard a guess now, based on when I was there, I'd say there's probably even now there may be 2 to 3, maybe 4 people who have got that kind of experience.
Okay, and so from your memory, would you say the majority of staff didn't have previous experience of having worked in the kind of environment that we're talking about?
Yes.
Thank you. We talked a little bit this morning about E-Wing and the particular environment of E-Wing. Did you have any additional training to the basic training for working at Brook House to work on E-Wing?
No. No additional training.
When you were in the prison service, did you ever work in a segregation setting?
No. I may have covered a shift if they were short-staffed, but I was never assigned to that unit.
That wasn't your regular
role?
Okay, thank you. One final question. This is it. So to take you back to the 25th of April, I'm not going to ask you any specifics about it, but obviously we have a picture of a detained person who's on constant supervision, has engaged in multiple self-harm attempts throughout a relatively short period of time, is on Rule 40 removal from association. So there's multiple things going on for this person. Do you have any recollection of whether there was any management involvement in talking about the right way to be managing that person?
No. I don't even need to think about that because that hardly ever happened. We wouldn't have a conversation or a sit-down or a meeting to discuss the future of a certain detained person. That never happened.
My follow-up question was going to be, was it unusual for that not to happen? From what you're saying, it wasn't unusual, that was not common practice at Brook House.
I don't remember that happening.
Do you have an opinion about whether it would have been helpful, necessary to do such thing in an instance like this?
With all due respect, I don't work there anymore. I don't think it takes anyone, I don't think you need me. I think these are common sense things, and probably anyone in this room can come up with these suggestions. You don't need someone as low ranking as myself to come up with these ideas that what you're suggesting. So why aren't they put into place? There must be people out there who are very experienced, who are much higher up than me, who come up with all sorts of things like this that should be there for the detainees. I don't know what it's like now because I'm not there, but when I was there was nothing, absolutely nothing. No mental health training, and I'm not talking about a day course or half a day course or you sit on a computer for an hour and fill out multiple choice questions. In the prison service, I wanted to touch on this earlier, but I forgot. There was a hospital unit that had doctors and nurses from the NHS there, and if prisoners were deemed to have mental health problems or any kind of medical issues that we were not capable of dealing with, they would be assigned to that unit. And it was majority of NHS staff with maybe one officer. And it looked like a hospital. It was a hospital wing. There's nothing like that, or there was nothing like that at Brook House. I'm sorry, I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. I appreciate it's been a long day, and I know you had a very long journey to get here as well, so I'm very grateful for your evidence. I know it's not an easy experience.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. 10 o'clock tomorrow, Nathan Ring.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's 10. It is 10, yeah.
10 a.m. Thank you.